They never imagined how calculating I could be. My name is Laura Miller, I'm 45, and I'm an investment analyst. I spend my days sifting through numbers, assessing risks, and devising strategies to protect my clients' money. My routine is one of precision, meticulous analysis, and calculated decisions. So, that bright morning, when I opened my bank statement for a simple review, what I found was more than just distorted numbers. It was the chilling discovery of a financial betrayal that felt intensely personal. Right in the first entries, something was off. Transfers I hadn't authorized, withdrawals scattered in small amounts, but enough to erode my savings. The money I had carefully accumulated over the years, the fruit of my labor and discipline, was vanishing before my eyes, diluted in suspicious transactions. Each line of that statement narrated a silent diversion, crafted to mask dark intentions. My eyes fixed on a few details: unusual times, unknown beneficiary accounts, patterns that betrayed the touch of someone intimately familiar with my banking routines. Amidst this reality, an icy certainty gripped me. Whoever was behind this knew exactly where and how to strike. Mark, my husband, the man who shared my life, my home, my dreams, and my accounts. The charismatic entrepreneur who always presented ambitious plans but hid a parallel game from me, one of vanity, luxury, and now, betrayal. The pain of the discovery didn't break me. Instead, something inside me awoke, a calculating coldness, a burning desire to understand, reverse, and win this invisible battle. It wasn't time for despair, but for strategy. I took a deep breath, letting my head clear. In my mind, I repeated, almost like a mantra, "They never imagined how calculating I could be." This phrase wasn't just a silent revenge, but the very fuel of my reaction. I wouldn't be a passive victim, but an active agent in rebuilding what had been taken from me, and in punishing those responsible. I immediately began systematically analyzing each transaction. My experience allowed me to identify inconsistencies that would have gone unnoticed by many. Transactions in third-party accounts, strange distributions at improbable times and places, deliberate attempts to obscure the trail of funds. My mind traced circuits, connected dots, as if assembling an invisible web of diversion and fraud. I realized this wasn't an isolated or impulsive act. There was method, coldness, and repetition. At the same time, the proof of the betrayal went beyond the money. It was the broken trust within what I believed to be our shared life. Each stolen number reflected an episode of falsehood, a well-constructed lie. As the morning sun streamed through the office window, illuminating the papers scattered across the desk, its light brought not relief, but the awakening of my determination. They, Mark and his accomplice, never considered the resistance they would encounter. I wasn't just a victim. I was the calculator of my own destiny. And at that moment, I decided I would fight with the coldness of numbers, the rigor of analysis, and the tireless focus of someone who knows exactly how to win a game of power and money. Let them be warned. They never imagined how calculating I could be. And they never will. The signs were all there, scattered like pieces of a puzzle I had preferred to ignore. Scattered fragments of a reality that only revealed itself when I allowed myself to see them. The truth is, for years, I let blind faith in Mark cloud my perception, numbing my instincts with the comfort of marital routine and the conviction that we were together in a common battle. But now, faced with explicit betrayal, there were no misinterpretations, only the cold recognition of what hid behind the mask. I recalled moments from the past, subtle scenes that, at the time, seemed innocent or explainable. Mark admitting he was having financial difficulties, communicating with a certain weight in his tone, asking for understanding and patience. "It's just a passing phase," he said. "I'll turn things around." I listened and believed. On those occasions, I saw in him an overburdened but determined man. I saw myself in his emotional truce, willing to give him time and space to rebuild our dreams. Only with time, I understood how these difficulties served to camouflage a larger diversion. The memory of a night when we arrived exhausted from a condominium meeting came back fresh, Mark displayed on his tablet mind-boggling investment charts, a kind of illusion show to reassure my confidence. I, tired and distracted, accepted without question, needing to believe. Later, when mentally reviewing everyday conversations, I identified previously imperceptible patterns. My questions about expenses or canceled trips were deflected with evasive answers, with glances that sought to hide more than they said. I realized that, little by little, he was undermining the foundation of trust between us with small half-truths and selective silence. As I revisited these moments, my mind returned to the present. With audacity and control, the audit of my own accounts continued. The contrast between past and present left me restless, but determined. My routine had transformed into an undeclared investigation. I spent hours sifting through statements, cross-referencing information, interpreting every movement, no matter how discreet or seemingly trivial. I rigorously applied the same techniques I used to protect clients' assets, now geared toward combating an intimate and unexpected threat. I noticed that suspicious transactions always coincided with events involving Mark, weekend trips, meetings he claimed to have had, or commitments that justified his absence. Other clues showed me regular transfers to accounts that had never appeared in our joint life, but whose movements synchronized with cash withdrawals scattered across unusual dates and locations. The complexity of the scheme left me both surprised and fascinated by the coldness of the scheme, designed to deceive even the most attentive eyes. During those long afternoons and nights poring over everything, my mind oscillated between rage, burning like a subterranean fire, and the cold, analytical clarity that kept me focused. I had to separate what I felt from what I needed to do. The biggest challenge was using logic to maintain sanity in the face of emotional chaos. Beyond the financial aspect, Mark's betrayal represented a profound rupture in what I thought was the foundation of our marriage. Every stolen dollar felt like a silent stab, every silence from him an unspoken lie. I felt betrayed not just financially, but in my soul. It was in this maelstrom that I reframed our history. I wouldn't let myself drown in pain or resentment. I needed to find the strength to reclaim what was mine, my savings, my dignity, and above all, my future. I discreetly talked to a close colleague, someone I trusted, who helped me validate some hypotheses about questionable financial transactions and possible legal avenues. The help was focused and technical. The responsibility for the strategy, that was solely mine. On the edge between emotion and reason, I became a relentless strategist. What seemed like a labyrinth of deceit began to reveal itself as a map I could follow. I understood that this relationship, marked by layers of lies and betrayals, needed to be deconstructed so I could rebuild myself. What remained wasn't just a sum of financial losses, but a painful, yet real, chance to reinvent myself. And so, strengthened by the clarity of my situation, I prepared my mind and my strategy for the next step. The meticulous analysis of the accounts and the money trail was crucial, but my project went further. It was the reconstruction of myself, the redefinition of the rules of my own game. They had undermined my security, but they never imagined how sharp a mind I would bring to this battle. I wasn't just the victim. I was the architect of my turnaround, and that certainty would be the foundation that would sustain everything that would follow. If I could summarize how I felt at the exact moment I decided to act, I would use the word vigilance. It wasn't a simple, impulsive reaction, nor a desperate search. It was a meticulous operation, an investigation that had to go unnoticed. Because in this dangerous game, the slightest noise could alert my enemies and close all doors. My first step was to devise a plan to discreetly monitor Mark's financial and personal habits. Details that had previously escaped me became valuable data. I learned to observe without being seen, to notice the small deviations from his routine, the poorly rehearsed excuses, the nervous glances at his phone. I didn't have many allies. I knew that trust had broken down in the most intimate core. Still, I sought the technical support of a heavyweight colleague, an external analyst with deep knowledge of forensic audits. We worked in absolute secrecy. He helped me understand how to penetrate the layers of protection that masked the discrepancies, But the main line of investigation was mine, and my responsibility. The first obstacle was bureaucratic. In my eagerness to delve deeper into the investigation, I realized that access to accounts and documents related to Mark was blocked or redirected to third parties. Banks, administrators, and investment firms didn't offer the complicit transparency they do to regular clients. It was necessary to initiate legal requests, gather evidence, and build arguments to request confidential information, a battle that demanded patience and finesse. While I waited for these processes to unfold, I intensified my observation methods. Every meeting, every call Mark made was noted, every behavioral pattern was mapped like a signal in a complex web. I was building a picture that showed his leeway, his spaces, and his possible partners. I tried to control my presence in the domestic environment, avoiding raising suspicions. I disguised investigations with everyday tasks, neutral conversations. Keep in mind that he thought the scene was calm, under control. He never noticed the sharp lenses watching him. During one of these moments, I found a curious pattern: the frequent use of a corporate credit card to which I did not have access. The expenses recorded were far from legitimate business expenses. Expensive restaurants, luxury hotels, expensive gifts, all dispersed on strategically spaced dates to avoid raising alarm. Something told me that there was a thread to pull. It was days of meticulous data collection, followed by sleepless nights interpreting information, cross-referencing statements, and inventorying every strange transaction. With each new piece of data, the context network grew, and the importance of the accomplice, Camila, began to emerge clearly. Camila wasn't just a passing figure. It seemed she played a central role in funding the luxurious life Mark flaunted behind my back. Their modus operandi worked in sync. Money was diverted from our account, passed through obscure circuits, and reached her, enabling this lifestyle at the expense of my unsuspecting nature. It is also at this point that I understood how much Mark had orchestrated to keep me away from the truth. His care in hiding information and constructing plausible versions showed me not only the coldness of a swindler, but the complexity of a plan executed with precision. Even faced with this scenario, I didn't let myself be defeated. My determination grew proportionally to their resistance. I knew that to avenge the betrayal, I would need to be even more careful and strategic. A chess game where every move had to be thought out 3 steps ahead. The initial investigation not only gave me crucial information, but also established me as the owner of that story, the strategist who would define the course of events. I never lacked analytical skills. What was missing was channeling all that into a greater purpose. And I found that purpose: to unravel the scheme, recover what was taken from me, and close this chapter with a silent but definitive turnaround. For that, patience was my greatest asset. The promise I had made to myself echoed with every task. They never imagined how calculating I could be, and I was certain they hadn't even begun to see the true extent of the game I was about to begin. As I delved deeper into the analysis of the financial movements and the internal machinations of our crumbling marriage, the mysteries began to unravel one by one, like veils falling before a sharp and merciless gaze. The coldness of my analysis allowed me to see beyond the numbers, revealing the subtle details of a scheme carefully and meticulously orchestrated by Mark and Camila. It was impressive and, at the same time, painful to see how that system of diversions worked with almost mechanical precision. Mark manipulated the financial levers, diverting funds to accounts controlled by third parties, shell corporations, and individuals who existed only on paper. And then the money followed a winding path until it reached Camilla's hands. There, it was diluted in exorbitant spending, unknown investments, and of course, in funding the luxurious life that the two kept secret. I used the most advanced financial tools I knew, data analysis technologies and financial intelligence, to unravel this entanglement, cross-referencing bank statements, credit cards, public records, and even small operational glitches that not even Mark had foreseen. As the weeks passed, the investigation gained body and structure. I discovered that the operations carried out in the name of straw men and shell companies did not follow a random pattern. There was an internal logic. a sequence of movements that avoided suspect lists in banks and regulations. The modus operandi of the financial racket gradually revealed itself, and I organized everything into maps and charts that outlined the flow of secret money. But that wasn't all. While unraveling the gears of the scam, I needed to control the tension that was building up in our domestic life. The emotional wear and tear grew, but I learned to mask it with almost surgical control. Every interaction with Mark had to seem natural, without raising suspicions, because he still didn't know that his web was being meticulously unraveled. Coexistence became a minefield of crossed glances, strategic silences, and small gestures laden with hidden meaning. He kept up the appearance, compliments, plans for the future, promises that sounded too hollow, while I, silently, managed the internal storm that had settled in. On the few occasions when his answers became too evasive, I made a mental note. I didn't let anything pass, no matter how small. The challenge was to neutralize my own impatience, as a mistake could cost too much. It was in this simultaneous game, between analyzing financial data and directly observing the origin of the problem in my home, that the inner mantra strengthened. They never imagined how calculating I could be. With the network of contacts and tools of my profession, I sought to gather not only financial, but also circumstantial evidence. I discreetly examined phone records, messages, vehicle movements, everything in search of Camilla's trail. I detected frequent meetings and reservations at luxury hotels, luxury that I had never allowed in our home. Each discovery increased my certainty of the extent of the conspiracy, but also gave me fuel for strategic patience. Everything was falling into place. The pieces of the puzzle were taking definite shape, and I was preparing the basis for the counterattack. During this phase, I also needed to act cautiously to avoid any premature exposure that could alert Mark or Camilla. The investigation needed to remain invisible, a ghost to which they had no access. I studied financial documents, not only public ones, but also movements in investment funds linked to Mark. I noticed subtle manipulations to transfer assets between these investments, making direct tracking difficult and creating the illusion of normality for any distracted auditor. Discovering these details required endless hours of meetings with my trusted colleague, technical discussions, and the development of hypotheses and strategies. The complexity of the scheme impressed me for its audacity and efficiency, but nothing compared to my desire to disarm it. In moments of silence, I reflected on the transformation I myself was undergoing. From victim to investigator, from suspicious to strategist. The pain, although present, became fuel for my determination. A delicate process, where emotion had to be carefully managed so as not to steal attention from the necessary rationality. The metamorphosis of my mind had another focus, to use knowledge and attention to anticipate movements, close gaps, and emotionally ambush those who thought they had the advantage. It was a silent but intense combat. I knew that with any slip, I could be surprised or have information deleted, evidence destroyed. Therefore, my routine became rigorously planned, with multiple backups, coded notes, and discrete meetings to exchange data with my colleague outside the family network. Weeks turned into months. The network of money, accounts, people, documents, clothes, trips, and lies became a web where I projected myself safely, not as prey, but as a predator. It was only a matter of time until I could reveal everything, confirm my suspicions, and take the first steps towards the definitive turning point of the game. They would never imagine that, beneath the surface of a seemingly passive wife, there was a financial analyst who already dominated the map of the fraud, and who controlled the timing of this silent confrontation. My role, after all, would not only be to reactivate my finances or recover my assets. It was to rebuild my confidence in the world, starting by re-establishing control over my life, my narrative, and above all, my future. In the heart of this battle, I found myself and strengthened myself, ready for the next chapter. They never imagined how calculating I could be, and they wouldn't know until it was too late. After months navigating through figures, forged documents, and the web of illusions that Mark and Camilla had created, I could finally see the full scope of the scheme into which I had been involuntarily inserted. The truth hit me not just because of the staggering numbers, but because of the scale and precision of the fraud. Mark wasn't just a dishonest husband. He was a cold, skilled architect of a scheme that went far beyond our marriage. He and Camilla had built a complex system of financial maneuvers, using shell companies, simulated contracts, and offshore accounts to hide the origin and destination of the money that had been mine. The scheme began with a series of clean transfers from our joint account to multiple accounts held by various companies, most controlled by straw men or ghost investment funds. These transactions were carefully synchronized with fake tax documents from non-existent entities. It was a game of shadows designed to disperse the money, making it disappear into the accounting labyrinth. The financial complexity of the scheme also included the strategic use of leverage. Mark created the illusion of legitimate transactions, using loans and derivatives to mask real losses and gains, thus protecting some of the money in high-risk investments that he and Camilla knew would move quickly, allowing them to enjoy luxury without leaving easily accessible traces. Camilla, in turn, masterfully covered the origin of the funds, investing part of the money in properties and luxury items in her name, and using the rest to maintain the lifestyle afforded by the stolen money. Together, they created layers of protection to prevent any superficial audit from detecting their years-long fraud. I was impressed by the meticulousness of the plan, which seemed orchestrated to withstand any kind of common investigation. But precisely because of that, my response needed to be different, more calculated, more precise, and inevitable. To mount my counterattack, I used everything my professional background afforded me: risk analysis, portfolio diversification, and especially mastery of financial leverage techniques, now transformed into my sword and shield. This wouldn't be a simple recovery of losses. I had decided that this battle would be fought on the ground where I was sovereign, using the weaknesses of the system they created against its own architects. For weeks, I devised a financial plan that mixed safe and aggressive investments, carefully balanced to maximize gains without incurring the usual risks associated with such strategies. I knew that each step had to be taken with absolute precision, so that a cascading effect would bring down the foundations of the financial network created by Mark and Camilla. My strategy was divided into calculated stages. First, cancel or block all known avenues of diversion that I had managed to identify, with the help of lawyers and compliance experts. In parallel, I started reinvesting in liquid and protected assets, sources of cash that would allow me to react quickly if they tried to resist. I always took care to keep my movements discreet, so as not to anticipate my intentions or arouse suspicion. I knew from personal experience that this battle wasn't fought in the open field, but within the shadows of numbers, where information and timing are the keys to power. Each investment, each redemption, was calculated to exert direct and silent pressure on their hidden reserves. The financial movement behind my retaliation proved as relentless and unexpected as the initial pain I felt when I discovered the betrayal. I received daily detailed reports showing me the impact of my maneuvers as soon as they took effect. I saw their accounts freeze, operations that once seemed automatic began to fail, and slowly, Mark and Camilla's web began to unravel. The economic confrontation didn't call for explosions or bombastic declarations. It was a silent duel, built in fractions of a second and algorithms that deconstructed fraudulent financial movements with the same skill with which they had created them. However, this power play also had its emotional and personal side. I knew that I was facing not only financial cartels, but also the ruin of what I had considered to be my family. Controlling my emotions while witnessing the calculated destruction was, perhaps, the greatest test of my self-control. I mentally repeated the phrase that had become my mantra, the driving force of my journey. They never imagined how calculating I could be. This conviction empowered me to continue, to not retreat an inch in the face of the uncertainties and silent threats that permeated this hidden battle. Deep down, I knew that this wasn't just a financial game. It was the reconstruction of my identity and the affirmation that even in the most adverse situations, knowledge, strategy, and patience were powerful weapons against any betrayal. Inwardly, I was about to deliver the final blow, a move that would not only recover what was rightfully mine, but would mark the end of the impunity of those who dared to betray me. They had underestimated me from the beginning, underestimated not only my intelligence, but my ability to devise a plan worthy of the challenge before me. And when we met in the final play of this silent game, the surprise would be all mine, because then I would have the definitive victory in my hands. The decisive phase of my plan began like the whisper of a distant storm, growing silently, without fanfare, but inevitable in its advance. Everything I had planned, analyzed, and waited for converged on that moment, the turning point where the financial web built by Mark and Camilla would begin to unravel in the face of my relentless strategy. For months, I had consolidated evidence, aligned actions with my small group of experts, and orchestrated surgical strikes on the basis of their fraudulent operations. Patience and silence were crucial to keeping my steps invisible, while their pleas for control and security began to turn into murmurs of despair. First stage, the activation of the blockades and court orders. Based on robust evidence and backed by relentless legal work, I filed measures to freeze the accounts linked to the questionable money flows. Restraining orders were sent to various financial institutions, banks, asset managers, brokerages, blocking access to funds and preventing any suspicious activity. These restrictions began to take effect almost immediately. Automated transactions that previously went unnoticed started to fail. Transfers were rejected. Payments highlighted routine inconsistencies. I watched the effects in the daily reports with a mixture of calm and determination. It was confirmation that the gears of the scheme, which seemed too complex to unravel, now faced an implacable and meticulous force. Mark, once confident, began to show subtle cracks, difficult to conceal. He was no longer the imposing man from the wedding, but someone wrestling with frantic phone calls, emergency plans, veiled worries. His voice, once firm and assured, became laced with anxiety in conversations with accomplices and legal representatives. Camilla tried to maintain appearances. She continued to flaunt her lavish lifestyle on social media, the dinners, parties, and trips, attempting to project an image of indifference and control, but her glances and gestures betrayed her growing insecurity. In private moments, I was informed by sources that the pressure made her steps seem more sluggish, as if the world she relied on was crumbling beneath her feet. I, in my role, remained uncertain only about the ideal time to maintain silence. Between one action and another, the thread of patience tightened but never broke. I maintained my impassive demeanor, associated with the firmness of someone who knows the value of discreet strategy. I avoided direct confrontations, knowing that impatience could reveal my intentions. The second phase of the plan involved the reversal and reallocation of the legitimate assets that were still under my control. With the help of financial and legal experts, I executed rapid transactions, diversifying investments in liquid assets, secure funds, and applications that gave me flexibility and protection. These resources would be the solid foundation for my financial recovery and long-term counterattack. This maneuver allowed for a crucial advantage: asset security and agility in the face of any attempt at retaliation. It was like building an invisible fortress in the middle of the financial battlefield. With each new movement, I analyzed precise reports that confirmed immediately diminished balances, fulfilled blocks, frustrated attempts to intercept flows. It was the materialization of my countless hours of work, controlled nerves, and calculating reasoning. However, the emotional dimension of this game was as intense as the technical one. Confronting traders so close was a test of my sanity. The awareness of our marriage's shared ruin accompanied me, but I learned to filter these emotions so as not to be overwhelmed by them. Controlling what I felt was essential to maintain focus and objectivity. In daily interactions with Mark, I maintained the mask of controlled distance. He attempted veiled provocations, indirect questions, and demanding glances, but I closed off access to any emotional reaction, reserving myself for the realm of strategic silence. Meanwhile, I watched, albeit from a distance, the silent financial collapse consuming the structure they had deemed invulnerable. The web of lies so carefully constructed began to unravel, and this was my greatest evidence that the plan was working. There was no need for public confrontations or explosive statements. The loudest noise was the absence of movement from the financial doors they had always opened with confidence. This is what most desperate them, without them knowing that it all happened by my will and command. My victory was made of numbers, firm decisions, cold calculations, a vengeance without screams, but full of meaning. And when I repeated my inner mantra, they never imagined how calculating I could be. I felt that I was not only overcoming the damage caused, but repositioning who I was in the world. Because after all, it wasn't just a financial battle. It was the reconstruction of my story, the control of my life, and my dignity. And when this last move is made, the surprise will be all mine. The definitive victory will be in my hands. The silence that now permeates my days is not the emptiness that loneliness brings, but the tranquil sound of reconstruction, of silent victory, the fruit of unwavering patience and meticulous strategy. The game that, for months, I conducted with the coldness of numbers and the determination of someone who knows exactly what they want, has reached an inflection point where I can finally feel the weight of freedom returning to my body and my mind. Recovering what was stolen, much more than money, was, for me, a process as subtle as it was powerful. Every cent regained in the spreadsheets is the reaffirmation of my control, my autonomy, and, above all, my right to decide my own destiny. But the greatest triumph did not reside in the bank balances and statements. It was in my ability to rebuild my confidence in myself and the future that still lies ahead. The ruins of the lies and betrayals that once imprisoned me began to serve as foundations for a new Laura, stronger, wiser, and as calm as a mind that has learned to reinvent itself. I clearly remember the moments when disappointment threatened to suffocate hope, but it was precisely in those moments that my determination solidified. I would not be a victim for life, but the author of my own freedom. My routine has gained a new cadence, a rhythm that combines discipline and self-care. I studied more, planned more carefully, and created barriers that would never again allow anyone to invade my personal and financial world with such depth. My home, once the stage for whispers and suspicions, is now my safe haven, a space where transparency and truth write the laws of coexistence. I decided that, in this new stage, Mark and Camilla would cease to exist in my life. I don't harbor resentment. I carried, and perhaps still carry, sadness for what was lost. But there's no room for shadows to slow me down or prevent me from shining. I removed them from my universe with the same determination with which I reclaimed everything. They are characters from the past who no longer define the present. Now my steps are firm, guided by the knowledge I gained throughout this arduous journey. Experience has taught me patience and strategy, to understand that intelligence lies not only in acting quickly, but in acting at the right moment, with the necessary preparation. I look ahead with the confidence of someone who knows that the only constant is the ability to adapt and learn. Of course, the pain of what I lost persists, because it wasn't just a financial matter. It was years, projects, dreams, and trust that crumbled, and that price is too painful to ignore. However, I will never let that weight define or paralyze me. What they tried to destroy in me became the engine to continue and grow. Today, I am the architect of my existence, writing each chapter of the future with clarity, courage, and above all, calm. The freedom I have conquered is made of conscious choices, and the experience of someone who knows it's possible to reinvent oneself when everything seems lost. And even in the face of the new peace that surrounds me, I don't forget, I never forget, the mantra that accompanied me throughout this journey. They never imagined how calculating I could be. This phrase echoes in my mind as a constant reminder of strength and strategy. It wasn't just a phrase, but a commitment I honored with every step, every decision. They looked at me expecting weakness, but found a sharp mind. A woman who, against all expectations, became unbeatable. This certainty strengthens me and makes me look to the future with serenity, ready for the challenges that still lie ahead. because now I know I can overcome them. After all, with the knowledge, discipline, and calculated coolness that brought me here, there is no limit to what I am capable of achieving. I am Laura Miller, analyst, strategist, survivor, and victor. And this, finally, is my new reality.